Welcome, everyone, to the Unfiltered Podcast. This is Lee Stephenson, Executive Director of Church Planting for Converge.
I'm Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America and Southeast.
And we're excited for our conversation today. We're talking about another level of multiplication. In our conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about multisiting. And there are different formulas for multisiting. There are hybrids that have been developed, I'd say, over the last 10, 15 years. Where you're seeing it done differently based on context, city, urban, rural. Some people are going, hey, it's video venue only. Some people go live teaching. Some people are going, it's more of a family of churches. So there are a lot of different layers when it comes to multi-site. But I do think it is a usable strategy when it comes to reaching more people for Jesus. And so part of our conversation is more not necessarily on the methodology, like, hey, just do this, video venue, for instance, but is when do you realize in your church that you are at a place where you're actually ready to multi-site, depending on whatever methodology of that you're going to choose to do that. So Danny, I mean, when you were in your urban context, church planter in Milwaukee, by the time you left the church, you had 3 different sites that were running. Why don't you give us just a quick overview of the 3 different sites, the methodology behind that, and then we'll talk a little bit about what were the triggers that you were looking for along the way too.
Yeah, so I think just to start out is that I was originally anti-multisite, so being a church planter and just sold out to church planting, and there was this new thing, early 2000s, at least it was becoming more and more prevalent, like multi-site, and I would see that and I kind of like, well, that's not really church planting. That's not really multiplication. That's just like a glorified announcement person. Just so I had kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Went to Exponential, would see how people were just getting giddy about it. And I was seeing kind of copycat type of thing, which didn't help. And then what happened is I began to be mentored by someone who was a pastor of a multi-site church and saw a different side of it and how it was effectively reaching people for Christ and raising up disciples. And so that's where it became for us an option, because what had happened is our building that we owned and that we were meeting in, we were maxed out at 3 different services. And so our option was sell the building, buy a new building that was bigger, which is very hard. And
like you didn't want to do like 8 services.
I mean, it starts to have a diminishing return of how you can do that. So I didn't really want to do 8 services. We thought about church planting, like, do we just, send out, 30 people and, create some room for a couple months or whatever type of thing. And what happened is we ended up choosing to do multi-site and church planting at the same time, parallel, like literally one weekend brought in the church planter and said, whoever wants to go with the church planter, they're planting an autonomous church. It's a little bit farther suburb out, and we had some good families go with them. And we said we also are putting a plan in place to be able to do multi-site. So instead of just one or the other, and I'm just a huge advocate now of both planting and multi-site, but that the church needs to think through why they're doing which one and the context, the circumstances. There are, instead of saying this one's right, this one's wrong, or this one's better, or this one's not as good, it to me totally depends on circumstances that I have seen more churches make mistakes in because they see other people doing it and because it worked for them to do a multi-site. Just do it, or because it's the cool thing. And especially when it was like, we are 2 churches, or, 1 church and 2 locations was like the slogan that everyone wanted to put on their website. And it was just like, makes me puke sometimes. Because I'm like, why are you doing? So I think when you asked about the key indicator is, are you able to reach more people for Christ by doing whatever it is, fill in the blank. So don't think, well, we're not growing now, we're not reaching people for Christ now, but if we go multi-site, then all of a sudden we will, because you're basically just going to multiply whatever you have. So if you are a plateaued church or you are a declining church and you just choose to go to multi-site, that's what you're going to multiply. You're going to multiply decline or you're going to multiply plateau. So the key thing is are you in a healthy place? You are reaching people for Christ. You are discipling people. If you are, then that could be one of the options of how to do it. So So for us, we were very committed to a one message model. In other words, there is one speaker on the weekend. And the reason that we chose that is because it was so, our message was so tied to our small group structure. So what we said is it didn't matter which location, which service, or which small group you went to, you were getting really the same content. Now, we actually did do a blend of video and live, but it was still one speaker. So I'll fast forward to when you have when we have three different locations. There's one pastor who is preaching and driving around to different locations, and wherever they're not is a video, but it's still the same message that is being done. The other reason why that was so important to us is instead of having three people working on the same sermon, it's just one person is putting in all the time to do that, where the other pastoral staff and campus pastors are able to work on leadership and discipleship instead of 3 to 4 people all doing it. So I'm not even saying that's the only way to do it, but for us,
That's how you chose.
That's how we chose.
So
to
even
do
when
it.
you were at 3, you would visit all 3 locations on that weekend and speak live.
Yes. Yeah, and it got crazy, and we were down to literally minutes. And I mean, there was walkie talkies, and people do. I mean, it did get
Logistics
were challenging. And we were running fiber and high quality video and everything. So, and just learned a lot. Now, one of our biggest lessons that we learned is there's actually really not good to have both live and video at a location, because if people have the option to choose, they're going to choose live. So it gives an unequal weight where we just would have started, but we painted ourselves into a corner that we couldn't get ourselves out of. And there was some other, dynamics that were, involved with that. But
okay. So did you have a driver? Like when you were speaking, that would actually drive you to locations, or did you drive yourself?
So let me also say, we grew into a teaching team, which was really the most amazing thing, and had phenomenal communicators. So what that allowed is really solid teaching. We would even work together on a lot of the prep stuff, because we would preach through books of the Bible. So in the summer, we would spend a lot of time all kind of doing that, no matter who was actually preaching the sermon. And then so I was down to about probably 50% of the time, even by the time that I left. We tried to do the driver thing. It made more anxiety for me to have a driver, so I switched back. Some other people chose to have a driver. They like to have a driver. For me, I wanted to just get in the car, be in control, get there. If I didn't get there, it was my fault. I didn't have to talk to anybody. I didn't have to, so I chose not to have. I tried it for a while.
Okay.
A couple weeks to have a driver.
The anxiety just crept up too much.
So instead, it literally was, because of the way that we had, because I think we had 5 different services. Literally, someone had the car started, ready for me to literally walk out the backstage of whichever location I was at to move into the next one.
Okay.
So
what would you do different now?
Yeah.
Knowing the experience and all that kind of stuff going, or would you just keep it exactly the same format and methodology that you did before?
Definitely different for us. And by the way, we continued to plant at the same time that we did multi-site. So for us, it was a matter of figuring out for this community, and if God gave us a planter, they planted. If God gave us a campus pastor, then we did a campus. So we made those decisions, again, based literally on the circumstance and what was working for us in our structure and who we had at the time. From a logistical standpoint, I would now not do what we did with the whole live and video. It would be have a push site that literally is all of your live is here and video, and everything else will get pushed to that site for video, so that and it's not about the driving back and forth, but of trying to communicate to culture of live versus video, and just all the confusion that comes with that. But instead saying, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to have the campus, pastor, that if that campus pastor is preaching, they're preaching at the live site, and that the video is getting pumped there. So
great.
But
and I would echo, for those that are out there kind of maybe playing around with the idea, should we multi-site? Is this a workable strategy? I would highly encourage you, work from the place of health. If there are holes in your health when it comes to your team, when it comes to the culture, when it comes to your finances, you're probably not ready. The second question in my mind is, do we have a culture that's worth replicating? If you sit there and go, I don't know if we really do, like, then church plant, like send church planters out, because they'll generate a new culture, and that new culture may actually fit best in that context. But if you say, go, our culture, what we have going here is healthy and it's good and it would work there, then multi-site might be your avenue to actually reach that community.
I think one of my biggest pet peeves that I have heard lately is people saying, well, we're taking the best of both worlds, of planting and of multi-site. But what they often tend to do is they take the worst of both and put it together. And they're doing multi-site because they get to put their name on it because other people are doing multi-site, but they take the worst. And so they actually divide. And that's where I've heard people say, well, we're multi-site, but we've got 2 live preachers with 2 different cultures with 2, and so it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. What you're describing would be able to be done better. You'd be more effective if that was just a plant, or the reverse, where it's like someone saying, well, we don't really, want to plant. We don't want a multi-site. We're going to plant. However, you have all of these resources. You've got this great branding, this great culture, that by borrowing or using that platform, you would actually reach more people for Christ by doing multi-site than you would by planting. And other times you'd reach more people for Christ by actually planting. And again, not that it has to even be one, because I do think there is that spectrum, but of thinking through the process of why you're doing what you're doing, and not just, well, I don't believe in using video, or I don't believe in this. Like, think through then. Well, then Are you saying that it's the brand or the name? Because then maybe it is actually multi-site, and just go for it and do it. So, anyways, you'll get me heated on this. So, at Harvest right now, you are essentially multi-site even from the beginning, because you kind of have 2. So you have the Hispanic congregation, but then you guys are also looking to do. We're
launching another one this coming fall. Yeah, we kind of probably did what you said don't do. So
what, the best of both worlds?
So
you can. There are some best of both worlds, but
I feel like from our experience and what we've seen, just being a student of the game for a long season of time, kind of going, hey, we're kind of building a hybrid model, is kind of what I say. But yeah, we are launching congregations is really the term we're using. It is a harvest congregation, but there'll be live preaching. And so it'll be the same message, the same passage, the same series. The discipleship process, the discipleship strategy are all the same. So same pathway, same children's ministry. It'll have the same feel. And so we're looking at replicating the culture, but with a level, I would dub 75% autonomy. So there's autonomy to contextualize things to the local congregation as necessary. Knowing, like, the way I preach in this community, they need to look a little bit different just to have the same impact in this community. And being in Central Florida, that's definitely the case, because you can go 30 minutes down the road and have a completely different culture. And so we're trying to play to the strengths of what's going on in that community, and not just assume everything that we do and how we do it we'll do it. But there's centralized services, so all the marketing, all the brand awareness, all the accounting, those things will all be handled from a central standpoint. So that way, basically, like, each congregation that we plant, we're basically providing them with a business administrator and an executive pastor. So that way the lead planter can really play to their strengths and not feel like they have to do all these other things. They can be a team builder, they can preach, they can motivate the crowd, build the culture, do those things. We're going to take care of all the rest for you. So we'll launch the next congregation in October, and then we're already got game plan on the next 3 kind of locations that we're looking at. And so if any of our listeners are out there want to be part of the Harvest family, and interested in planning one of those congregations, just give us a holler at harvestflorida.org.
That does not mean quit your church plant that you're doing right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think one of the things that and this goes back to even motive and motivation, the unreached that you're trying to reach or that you're saying you're trying to reach are not impressed that you're multi-site. They don't get it. They don't care. If you're doing it because you want to look good when you show up at a conference or within your network or denomination, you might, because we're multi-site. We are two churches in one location. Or no,
hey,
wait, the
why don't you put it
reverse.
on your website?
Yeah, put it on your website. It's like, don't do it for that reason. Think, how are we going to reach more people for Christ? What's the most effective way? And then, like you said, the spectrum there is you figure that out for yourself, because there's not one way. And yes, you can learn from other people and learn from mistakes, but try to just answer that question the most strategically that you can for your specific context and leadership.
Absolutely. And then play to your gifts.
Yeah.
Like if you're not an apostolic leader, multi-site may not be the way to go.
Yeah.
But if you're an apostolic leader, it's okay to embrace that and to lead accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, fun conversation. Multi-site is definitely another strategy to reach more people for Jesus. It's not going to go away. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to morph. We're going to continue to see multiple iterations of how this plays out. I think the biggest thing for our listeners, like, be courageous. Try some new things. Do what you need to do in order to reach more people for Jesus. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Unfiltered Podcast. Until next time, keep it real.